Hey everyone, Rory here, part two of the exciting series that we've got here with Azure Container Apps, and we're going to be focusing on network security. Now remember, this is a multi-part series here. We've already covered security best practices, and we're going to dive into network security. Next session, we're going to look at identity management, and then Key Vault, and also monitoring. So first of all, let's look at one of the many parts of network security, the firewall. Now we've got on Azure with Container Apps, multiple different types of firewalls. Now, what is the point of a firewall? The point of a firewall really is to stop things that you don't mention or you don't want to come in and out of your virtual network. Now, if you don't know what a Azure virtual network is, you can kind of think of it as a LAN, so a local area network. And that LAN there is where you put your container apps, your services, your databases there, and it gives you the opportunity, and let's go a little bit further here, to lock down your container apps. So here we have our container apps environment here, and you can see that it's all created inside a virtual network. Now with that virtual network, you can lock down access with it with something called a network security group. So over here, these are network security group, and you can see there's my container app 1, there's my container app 2, and I can define those routes in user-defined routes, and that will be pushed through to the firewall and say, hey, don't let anyone access anything that they shouldn't be, and don't let anyone go out to the wild internet if you don't want it to do that. And the network security groups are really on the hardware layers. You can go all the way down to IP address restrictions. So that's really the main components of network security for container apps. And well, Rory, that's easy to do, but it's a little bit more complicated when you want to productionize your environment. Now, to do that, I'm going to introduce you to an incredible series of demos called the Reliable Web App and the Modern Web App. So you can go to aka.ms/eap/doc, and it'll give you all the information around the modern web app pattern. And one of the modern web app services that you can do takes a container app and then says, wait a second, I want to go in and modernize for my cloud. And there is a legacy service that uses a non-container app or a non-async service there to send out emails. So in this case, though, we're going to use that container app to send out emails, and we're going to do it with the necessary network security. So if you want to know more about those patterns, definitely go check those documents, and you can go through all of the principles, the features. So what does it look like then once we actually see the environment? So this is the development environment. So the development environment is for developers to program and to deploy their services without having to worry necessarily around the network restrictions. When you think about it, and the last thing a developer wants is to not be able to do his job though. So over here, you can see we've got the container platform, and we've got the decoupled service code here, and we can scale up where necessary, and we reading those emails from a message queue. All the time, we can communicate with our underlying services through a virtual network. Now, each one of those endpoints that we want to couple our services, the container registry, the other Azure services, the cache, the database there, is created with a private endpoint. Think of a private endpoint as a tunnel from point A to point B that both points are aware of each other. All the time, we are going to use the web application firewall and load balancer to make sure that nothing comes in that we don't want and nothing goes out. Of course, we're also authenticating, and we'll get to that later in the series, with Active Directory here. So, Rory, that's pretty simple though, but I don't see the container app inside a virtual network. Can you be a little bit more specific? Now, remember I said to you, this is the development environment. Now, the development environment, it's really got no network security. So you've got the VNet, doesn't use a VNet. Load balancer doesn't really use a load balancer. It uses public internet access. It's not network isolated. There's no subnets. There's no network security groups. The ingress is just public. The firewall protection doesn't have it. The queues go onto a service bus, and it's pretty simple to do that, though. No zone redundancy, so you don't have multi-region deployment, though. Scaling rules, well, whatever, however many messages I'm going to scale up with my container app then. And then the identity security, it's system, so managed identities, and we'll get to that later in the series. So doesn't use VNet peering, doesn't use UDRs, and doesn't use private endpoints. So what about production? Now, production, we lock it down. You can see there, we for the VNets, we connected to infrastructure subnets in spoke, hub and spoke networks here. We've got a load balancer internal. We've got full isolation. We've got dedicated subnets, network security groups, private network only for ingress, Azure firewall in the hub VNet, private networks also with subnet for the service bus access. We've got zone redundancy enabled, and also we have peering for the VNet and also a hub firewall for UDR configuration. And well, what does this look like? Now, if you remember our previous diagram, now we've got multi-region support here. Now, in this region, it's a little bit overwhelming. Don't worry, if you go into the link that I sent you there, everything will be explained there. But you can see here, on this here, we've got one virtual network tunneling through to a using managed identities to another region. And this allows us to actually go in there and decouple our services, have failover with a 99.9% service level agreement, and all the time being able to front it with a firewall and go in with network security groups. Now, the hub and spoke here, you can see the hub virtual network there, network firewall, and you can use Bastion to go in there. And then obviously we have our spoke, though, which really is trying to make sure that you do not give access to the people that aren't necessarily needing the access. So how do we get started with this? So you can go in there and you can download the reference architecture, obviously in Java, but there is a .NET version also. And then you'll log in with Active Directory. You can see there the front door, and the firewall is going to authenticate you there. You are then going to, you can see there, see end-to-end TLS security. It's encrypted start to finish. And then you're going to start sending out emails. And we have a nice demo also, that once you set the emails out there, and you can see there service bus queue, and it's going to say, okay, cool, how many messages do you want to scale up though? And then you're going to scale up there with those messages there, decoupled services, and you're going to see that container app go in and scale up to handle all of those emails though. All the time in your dev, you don't want the developers to be bogged down by those security rules. And in your production, it is fronted on every aspect possible. So next, we're going to go through our demo. So you can go to https://github.com, Azure modern-web-app-pattern-java, or take a picture of that QR code here. And I'm going to showcase right now the with Visual Studio. So the first thing that we're going to show here is everything is driven by Terraform. So we've got infrastructure as a service. It's going to bring everything up, and also you can tear it down. And we have the front door. So the front door there, we've got a firewall policy here, and we're going to rate limit, and we're going to say, wait a second, do not let anyone in where I don't want you to. And it's going to load balance it there. Once we have that, in the next Terraform file I want to show you is that we create FQDNs. Basically, we want to know every single, because we authenticated, every single domain that is coming in, and also every domain that we go out. And it's so nice of them. Look at this, allow developer services here. So once we have that, we also want to go in there and say, okay, what network security groups? Postgres has one. And the network security groups say what's allowed in and what's allowed up. So we've got our network security groups. And then finally, in our container apps here, you can see there that our Azure container apps there is in its own subnet. So it can really restrict access there. And don't worry about it, that we have a secondary subnet also. And for the developers out there, we don't lock it down at all. So how does this look? Let's go through the code. So we've got our support guide. We pick it up through our queues. We don't really worry too much about where the queue is because we just got access in the container app. We pick it up with our email request here. And then obviously we want to also send a response. Let's just close those rest of those services there. And we want to go, let's just close the email processor here. And then once we have it there, okay, cool. You've got we pick it up from the queue and then send a response back and send it through to Azure Service Bus. And it's a great way to use the queue-based async to make sure that you really get the best out of your container app. And this container app is only running on 0.5 of a CPU and 2 gigs of RAM. So it's very small, very hyper efficient. And once you do that, so let's minimize that. And now we want to go into our browser. So we can see here, you can just go email the customer. So this is the customer demo here. We can go email the customer. You can email the guard that you need to set up here. And it's going to say to you, okay, cool. We're going to email that customer. Now, what does this look like in the security group here? So first of all, this is Azure Monitor with all of the services there. It hits the Active Directory front door, the firewall there. It accesses Postgres, Redis, and then it starts to read off the queues. And if you go into the queues here, you'll see there that something else is reading off there. Hey, there's my container app. My container app is reading off there. So something's popping in there, and another one is reading it here. And you can go into those services and play around with it, and you can view the logs there. Let's see if we can, there's service block send there. Let's see if we can find that email that went out there. And let's see, go through, there's my email, 2 samples, and I can go into service bus send here and see exactly where it came in there. And if you go right at the top here, you'll see there that it actually came through a front door, authenticated, went through Postgres, spent some time in the queue, and then was sent back afterwards with a nice response. So go through it there. You do need to spend a little bit of time to set up all of those, the production environment though. But please reach out. And I'm one of the maintainers of that demo, though, and it will be a great opportunity for you to learn the network security group, front door, firewall, VNet, and part of the series that we're doing right now, which is network security. Let's carry on with the demo here. So resources, you got those resources for the modern web app. Don't forget to go to the containerization and deployment on aka.ms/java-application-containerization and deployment, and access all of the new services and video series that we have that focuses on exactly how to get containers and the basics of containers. You also want to go through to the official Azure Container Apps documentation that will cover also on how to add network security. And finally, don't forget to go to JDConf and obviously like and subscribe this to our channel though, and you'll get the next series and the next episode in this series.